am going to give you a talk by Kennedy Schultz. We've been doing all month on the Wings of Love in honor of our founder of the Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta, Kennedy Schultz. And it's because of him this community has wings. He started this community 47 years ago. 47 years ago. And it was because of his vision of spreading new thought out into Atlanta and out into the world that we are all here today. So give Kennedy a hand. We know he's peeking in. Yes, yes, yes. So I'm going to honor him by regurgitating one of his talks titled, Take a Good Look. And he gave this talk on March 16, 1997. That was almost 3 decades ago. Wow. And as I listened to his talk about 28 years ago, to be exact, it gave me a deeper insight into who this man was, because I didn't have the opportunity to know him personally. He passed in 1999. And I didn't become a member of this wonderful center until 2013. So I've heard a lot about him from so many different people. But you know, people have a tendency to color, you know, when they're telling their perceptions and, you know, their opinions and stuff. So I decided to listen to a few more of his talks. And so it didn't necessarily give me an insight into him personally, but it did give me a better idea of his understanding of the science of mind and philosophy principles, and how he conveyed that wisdom in his talks. And one of the things that I noted about him is that he could be very humorous, but he also could be very direct and straight to the point. And sometimes that could come across cold and callous. But in this particular talk, his approach had softened. And he wanted us to know that God, as the life principle of all things, is love and loves us, its creation. So he begins by wanting us to take a good look. But at what? His response, of course, was yourself, of course, because staring at others would just be rude, and we don't do that. Over the years, the term take a good look has gotten a negative connotation. And many people would cringe if you were to say to them, take a good look at yourself. These words remind them of something said years ago, usually in a scolding way. And for some, there are bad memories connected with this piece of advice. We have heard our parents and our teachers tell us to take a good look at ourselves, and it's usually because we were failing in some way, maybe lacking in some so-called standard that they set for us. Kennedy made a great point in that. He said it really wasn't a good look at all that we were being advised to take. In fact, it was a bad look. It was a dreary look. He goes on to tell us that it was a poor look so that we could see how poorly we were doing. And this is why so many people have such a hard time taking a really good look at themselves today. We're afraid of what we might find based on our experiences from the past. And so we really don't even know what a good look is. So in his talk, he wants us to know what a good look really looks like and how much good it can do to take that good look. So the invitation for us is to take a good look at ourselves. The objective is to get to see how wonderful we are and to get to see how full of God's great goodness you actually are. Schultz wanted us to get to see how good-hearted we are beyond all that grudging stuff that we put ourselves through sometimes. To get us to see how good is the good that we are striving for in our personal lives, and how good is the good we are hoping in our world. When people are asked to take a look at themselves, you know what they do? They don't take a good look at themselves at all. They look at their problems. They look at their problems and they look at their shortcomings. They know them by heart, too. They can recite them. They could recite them all by imitation, and sometimes they even tell you about them without being invited. They look at their worries. They look at their fears. And so when you ask them to take a good look, it's not a very enticing invitation. Now, is it? Kenny goes on to say, but when you really take a good look at yourself, you discover what you are is the love of God in action. The love of God in action. Now, he doesn't mean the love of God for your problems or for your imperfections or your flaws, because the truth is, he says, God is not impressed at all with any of these things. And in fact, God is not even impressed with your better features either. Your virtues or your strengths, they mean nothing to God. And why do you think that is? Because God is a principle. What he was talking about is the love of God for our ultimate potential, for our infinite possibilities, because your potentials are what you really are, and it's the only thing that truly is alive about you and I. So he's talking about the love of God for what is unlimited about you. And sometimes when we are moving through this thing called life, we forget about what's unlimited about us. We forget about all that love and all of those divine attributes that Spirit has given us so freely. So, with all that being said, whoever you are, God sees your unlimited potential. This is the way God sees you. But let's hear this from Kennedy himself, shall we?
It is the only way God sees you. And it is the only spiritually correct way for you to see yourself. And by spiritually correct, I mean it's the only way that's ever going to get you anywhere. That is why I am inviting you to take a good look. Because when you and I start to see ourselves as God sees us, see, that is when we start to live in the fullness of health and peace and happiness that we so desire.
We start to see ourselves as God sees us. And he uses the word sees as a metaphor because we understand that God knows, perceives, because God doesn't have any eyes, I'm just saying. Since God is spirit, you know. We start to know and perceive how Spirit sees us. And that's when we start to live in the fullness of our health and peace and happiness and all the things that we desire. He also wants us to know that he's not going Pollyanna on us. And for those who know Kennedy, you know that he was not a Pollyanna type person. He wasn't telling us that our problems and shortcomings are not important. They are important. They are important, and they do need to be looked at closely, and they do need to be understood clearly. But the look we take at them needs to be a good look, not a bad look, not a sad look, not an angry look, not a shameful look, not a worrisome look, but a good look. We need to see those things for exactly what they are, but we do not need to see them for any more than they are. Now, what they are undesirable, unsatisfying, unattractive things that need our good attention. That's what they are, and that's all they are. They are not stains upon our souls implanted by some ancient sin of our forefathers, nor are they terrible things sent to punish us or to put us down to teach us a lesson. They are not things that define us. They are simply things that alert us. You can see the difference, right? They must not be taken as defining things about us. They must be accepted as things that alert us. So what do they alert us to do? They alert us for the need for a better way of using our minds. When we think about ourselves, our lives, where we were, where we've been, and where we're going, why do these undesirable things in our lives give us such discomfort? Why do they cause such pain? Why do they bring such misery? He tells us to make sure we don't forget to do something about them because they could cause more damage if we just leave them be. So these negative things are indeed important. These character defects, these flaws, whatever you want to call them, they are very important, but they are not all important. They're not all important. We are always greater than any of them. We're always greater. We're going to hear from Kennedy one more time about this.
Now, one of the greatest things I ever learned from this wonderful teaching of ours is this: that the mind that sees the problem for what it is the mind that can solve the problem. As a matter of fact, I'll take it even further. The mind that can see the problem for what it is the mind that must solve the problem, if the problem is going to get solved. It is the mind that can heal the wound rather than learn how to justify it and suffer along with it until it decides to go away of its own accord.
That's powerful, right? He goes on to tell us if it goes away on its own accord, it just does that to make room for another wound. The mind that sees the problem, the mind that sees the flaw, the mind that sees the error for what it is and becomes interested in healing it rather than becoming afraid of it, rather than becoming insulted by it, rather than becoming ashamed of it or guilt-ridden because of it, is the mind that will bring peace where there is no peace. That is the mind that will bring health where there is no health. That is the mind that will bring courage where fear wants to grow. That is the mind that will bring joy where morbidity is the order of the day. Kennedy tells us that we give ourselves over to the study of the science of mind because we want to be such people that use our mind creatively. We want to be people that are developing a mind like that. The one thing we have in common when we come here is that we are tired of taking a dim view of ourselves and our prospects. We may not be chock full of faith when we come here, but we know that life can be better than really what it is right now. And he tells us if we come here with just a little bit of faith, that's enough to grow on. And we can cultivate that faith so that it grows more and more through this wonderful philosophy. Because this philosophy is built on a foundation of faith and conviction and spiritual practices. And as we grow those things, he says, well, you get enough faith to do as they say, remove mountains. Don't we want to remove some mountains in our lives? We want to remove some mountains not only in our lives, but we want to remove some mountains out into the world. Because I tell you, the world's got a lot of big mountains that need to be moved. But you know, he said jokingly that we're going to leave some of the mountains there because people might want to climb them. Now, one of Kennedy's favorite quotations from Ernest Holmes is from the Science of Mind text, and he wrote, "We should be able to look at a discordant fact in the face and deny its reality." Now, he says that's an interesting statement because he's talking about looking it in the face, not burying our heads in the sand. Now, you've heard in this philosophy, turn away from that. I'm not looking at it. La, 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 la. Not my truth, not my truth. But he's saying to look at it in the face. He said that we should be able to look at a discordant fact right in the face for what it is, and at the same time see it, and at the very same time deny its reality. See, it is a fact of life. But at the same time, we need to realize, although it's a fact of life, it is not the truth of our being. It's not the truth of our being. You see, many people think that facts and truth are synonymous. That's a lie. They are not. These two words you can't use these words interchangeably because the facts are as much the truth as we now understand. The facts are as much as the truth as it now appears to be. But the truth is always infinitely greater than any fact. And as more the truth is known, we can change the fact of our lives for the better. And he said it's a very important point. He says, now Holmes goes on in the same vein and he says this. He says, we, meaning those who are interested in using their minds creatively, we should be able to look at a wrong condition with the knowledge that we can change it. That's in our lives, and that's in our community, and that's in our world. And tomorrow, I know where I'm going to be. I'm going to be at the Capitol. And I'm going to look at a discordant face for what it is. It's a lie. It's not the spiritual truth of who we are. And we're going to tell the whole world that big bag, ugly law is hurting people. It's hurting people. But I digress. Okay, back to what he was saying. In other words, when we see it, the first thing that we should realize in our mind is the knowledge that we can change it. And we don't have to know just how at the moment. But when we know, A, that it can be changed, it doesn't have to be there forever just because it's big, just because it's ugly, just because it seems so strong. It's important to realize the situation isn't permanent and that we play a key role in making that change happen. Because when we look at a discordant fact in the face, A, it can be changed, and B, that we are the key person in changing it, whether it be in our life or out in the world, then we know a change will come. All the information will come. Divine inspiration, intuition will come in utterly amazing ways. But we can't give up. And he went on and on about this. He started reiterating it. And I was like, okay, you just said that. You said that again. Why do you keep saying that? He keeps saying, A, know that it could be changed. You don't need to know the rest of the information at that point. And then he said, B, know it's your job to change it. If it's your life, it is your job. If you can't admit that, then you don't need the rest of the information, is what he told us. But once you clear on A and B, then C, the guidance on how to change it will come through. Why doesn't C come first? Because C comes after A and B. That's what I mean by him being humorous. He says we want to get smart with not knowing nothing. And so he then gives us an illustration to show us the difference between fact and truth. And he said that it takes approximately, and he didn't have TSA lines to go through, just FYI. He said it takes approximately 3.5 to 4 hours to fly from here to LA. So let's just say once you get on a plane, because it takes about 2 hours, 5 hours, that's about 6 hours just to get there. And he says that's a fact. And no one can dispute that. 3.5, 4 hours. However, if we were traveling to LA before the advent of commercial flight, say about 115 years ago, and I added 3 decades onto that, plus then I did the research to see when aviation really did take off. So it's 115 years ago. It would have taken closer to 3.5 to 4 days to get there. And then, at that point in time, that too was a indisputable fact. He said if you needed to get there faster, and if your life depended upon getting to LA faster, it would have been just too darn bad. The fact is, 115 years ago, it would have taken us 4 days to get there because facts don't change because we need them to. Facts don't change because we need them to, even if our life depends upon them. Facts don't change because we need them to, but facts do change as more of the truth is known. And he said that is the key. Facts do change as more of the truth is known, but only when someone understands this and becomes committed to do what they must do to change those facts, to learning what needs to be learned, to seeing what needs to be seen to change those facts. So what was an absolute fact over 100 years ago is now just a curious statistic. And over 100 years ago, that fact was staring everybody in the face. There was no denying that fact. Today, it's just a statistic. And then he says it wasn't time. It wasn't the element of time that changed that fact. It was people. It was people who decided to do whatever they had to do to know more about the truth. And in this case, the truth about what? The truth about physics, the truth about mathematics, the truth about aerodynamics, the truth about all the stuff it takes to get an airplane up in the sky for commercial aviation. So take a good look at the facts of your life, however limiting they may seem, however painful and unsatisfying they may be. Take a good look at the facts of your life and realize that the real you is the one doing the looking. The real you is the one that is doing the looking, and the real power in your life is in the viewer, not the thing being viewed. Not the thing being viewed. And as hard, confirmed, and well-established as any fact of your life may be, remember, the truth of your life is much greater. And as we know more of the truth about our lives and think of ourselves in greater terms, as we think of ourselves as truly individualizations of the Spirit of the living God, as we think of ourselves as sons and daughters and persons of the Most High, as we think of ourselves as all that I have is yours because you are my beloved, as we think of ourselves in greater terms, these discordant facts, those facts that we don't like, will change for the better. There will be a change. He said many years ago, he was a hot mess. Maybe not in those words, but he was a woe is me type guy. And he said there was a sweet woman that used to tell him, "Oh, darling, don't be so hard on yourself. God loves you." He thought it was such a sweet thing for her to say. But he never grasped its significance until he learned something about the science of mind. And then he realized it wasn't just a sweet sentiment, that it was a very powerful statement. He understood that when he learned more about the science of mind, he learned about how mind in him works to create a greater good through him. That is when he learned that God, the creative power in him, never confused him with his problems, never confused him with his mistakes or error ways. He wanted us to know that when he was beating up on himself, when he was hiding from Spirit, he was criticizing himself, accusing himself, worrying about himself. And what he meant by hiding from God, he said he was turning away from any possibility of learning anything better. He said that's what hiding from God is. He said, whoever you are, don't be so hard on yourself because God does love you. And then he says, but don't make the mistake of excusing yourself from the obligation to discover more of the truth about yourself and do something with it. Don't confuse doing that by treating yourself nicely, excusing yourself from your obligations. That's not treating yourself nicely. He says that is neglect. Blah, blah, blah. That is neglecting yourself terribly. It's denying your reality. He wants us to know that there is a new life in the center of us, that we all are centers in the Spirit of God. that it is forever eager to grow up into something wonderful. This life at the center of our being wants to grow and grow and grow into something wonderful. And it's entirely dependent upon the us that has gone before. And we have to remember the us that sees this challenge, the us that awakens to this inner presence, the us that awakens to the potential new life in us is the us that can fulfill it. And we need to give it a good look, a real good look, our best attention. The us that feels the need is the us that can fulfill the need. He added that it does not always make for easy. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do. He said the easiest thing is for us to proclaim helplessness and hope for the best, and that's spiritual negligence. Being good to yourself is not always about making yourself comfortable either. By saying, don't be so hard on yourself, God loves you, he didn't want us to take this to mean that we have no part in playing and healing our lives. He said, don't take it to mean that all you have to do is hope and wallow and somehow you'll improve someday, somewhere. What it means is stop putting yourself down and stop thinking of yourself as any kind of victim of anything ever. Because you're not. You're not, because God does indeed love you. What it means is that we have to stop confusing the wonderful aspect of us with the terrible things that we may have experienced and the painful things that we may feel or have felt. Because there is something in you that is better than that. There is now and forever a purity within you that knows how to create all things good and create all things new. And if you look at it, you will see it. And if you believe in it, it will show you a new way. And if you take that new way, it will bless your life beyond your wildest dreams. So take a good look. Discover it in yourself. Celebrate it in yourself. Identify with it as yourself because it's wonderful. And so are you. And so it is. Will the practitioners please come forth? So I want you to join me in this spiritual mind treatment, in this prayer, affirmative prayer. And let us not be afraid to take a good look at ourselves. Because there is only one power, one source and substance that is in and through all of creation. And it loves us. It wants to express through us. For truly, that is what our life is, this divine essence. It knows no bounds. And so we take a good look at this divine I am that is in the midst of our very being. And we say yes. We say yes to our greatest potential. We say yes to being sons and daughters and persons and children of the Most High. For we know that the highest God and the innermost God is one God, now and always. I'm so grateful for Reverend David, for the staff, for Penelope, for Shannon, for all the practitioners, all the ministers, and especially the members of the Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. For I know that they are blessed and are a blessing. For all the friends and visitors, I am grateful. For you give us wings. You give us hope. You give us love. And on that, I am so blessed and grateful. So I release this into the law, which is spirit, knowing that it's done and done well, and so it is.